Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios as ever from the beaches of the last free state in America, Florida. I am delighted to be joined today by Bobbie Anne Cox, who is an attorney in New York, who, as you're about to discover, for a range of reasons, is one of my personal heroes. We met last in Miami at the Brownstone Conference a little while back. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about who you are, what you've been doing, and why people are going to hear I'm such a cheerleader of your efforts.
Okay, yes, thanks for having me on. Yep, my name's Bobbie Anne Cox. I'm an attorney here in New York State. I've been practicing law for 25 years here. And prior to 2020, I was focused on tax certiorari work and representing property owners and trying to get more proper and fair adjustments on their property tax, in essence, their property tax bills. So if the local government was over assessing or overvaluing that property improperly, we would take them to court in order to get a more equitable distribution. So I've been in the business of dealing with government for pretty much 25 years of my law practice. But then when COVID came along in 2020 and we saw this tremendous overreach by the government in the name of public health and safety, I shifted gears and started focusing more on state level government instead of local government. And that's how I started to get into bringing lawsuits against the state of New York for their overreaching government actions, which when we get into the interview, I think your podcast viewers are going to be pretty surprised.
They now know why you're my hero. We were somewhat lucky here in Florida under a rational governor. But watching the madness in my home state of New York, I just can't believe that anyone went along with any of this crap. And the sheeple bent over and took it. So, what was the thing that really sparked you? And tell us a bit about the lawsuit you brought and the outcome. And I guess it's still ongoing, yeah?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, in 2020, our governor at the time was Andrew Cuomo, and he was really, I mean, there was just no question he was really going crazy with this power. The New York State Legislature in March of 2020 gave Cuomo this unbelievable power to, they called it make directives. What that really meant was they gave him the power to make laws,
Yep.
which is unconstitutional. The
Vastly.
executive branch where the governor sits, they don't make laws, right? They're supposed to enforce the laws that are made by the legislature in the legislative branch of our government. But because of fear, because of the pressure that was put on the legislators, they did delegate their lawmaking power to the governor. And for a whole year, he was making these incredible dictates and mandates. You had to wear a mask, and he would tell you where you had to wear a mask and when you had to wear a mask, and sometimes what kind of mask you had to wear. How did it fit on your face? That he was saying you can only have 10 people come to your Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, that was the greatest.
Yeah, I mean, he divided the state up with the regions of, this is a red zone, this is an orange zone, this is a yellow zone. And depending on what zone you were in, that depended how many people could go to your house of worship and worship. It was unbelievable. Restrictions on your freedom of speech, restrictions on your freedom of religion, restrictions on your freedom, period. Just
The crazy thing is, having grown up with the Cuomo boys, in general around, we knew a lot of people in common. They were thug assholes when they were kids. Like, there's nothing new. I was watching all this crap go on and listening to these idiots. I'm like, they're the same assholes they've been their entire lives. Nothing. Someone just gave them power. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't even just Andrew Cuomo. When he stepped down as governor in August of 2021, Kathy Hochul, who was the lieutenant governor
Right on
under
in.
him,
Yeah.
she all automatically she becomes governor because he
Gung ho.
resigned, and she just picked up exactly where he left off.
Yep.
So it wasn't just Cuomo,
Oh
it is now
no.
Hochul, who we've had since August of 2021. And she's just as much of a nightmare. They really do think that they have a fiefdom and that this is a monarchy. And people were the people, the voters, the regular citizens were getting so distraught over what was going on. Now, they were, of course, scared because of COVID, but what they were really affected by was what the government was doing to them.
That's
That
madness.
it was,
What I found insane in that time period is I had to be in Manhattan for some meetings, and I went up everywhere. I refused to wear a mask. I refused. I walked into places, and they looked at me as if I were carrying a machine gun ready to, kill kittens and babies because I had a mask, a piece of T-shirt over my face. I just refused. Yeah, yelled at. Got tried to deny service at restaurants. I was like, so you're saying I walk in and I'm a threat and I'm going to kill everybody, but the moment I take my seat, everything's fine and I can eat. Have you all lost your minds? It was
yeah,
crazy how much
yeah.
people went along with this nonsense.
Yes, they did. They absolutely did. And I think a lot of the reason that they did was because most people don't know what their rights are.
Like,
Uh, you
even
know,
more
they
terrifying.
they stopped teaching the Constitution in schools.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, I absolutely am a huge proponent of the Constitution. It should be taught starting in kindergarten and going straight through your college years.
yes. Every
It
quarter
is,
there's a quiz. And if you get some of the questions wrong, you sit after school for a remedial session to understand what the First Amendment means, why the Second Amendment's here. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely
it's very important. I do believe if people knew what their rights were, they would stand up for themselves. Um, but as you said, we saw people just following along, and
crazy.
it was really a problem. And people were really upset because they were also being financially detrimentally affected by the lockdowns.
Oh yeah, they threw
Not
12 million
everybody.
people out of work in one day.
Right. And not
Wow.
everybody can work from their computer at home
Oh,
or do Zoom meetings. All the service industries, the hair salons, the nail salons, the sporting coaches,
everything.
it was, obviously the people that run and work in restaurants, these service industries, those people did not have a way to make any money.
No.
Uh, and then you saw the federal government say, the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control, which is it's an agency in the executive branch of government. They issued a nationwide eviction moratorium,
Yeah.
telling landlords across the country that you can't evict your tenant for non-payment of rent. So what happened?
They
So
just
many tenants
hung
stopped
out.
paying their rent.
My favorite were the spoiled assholes from the Upper East Side of Manhattan who fled out to the Hamptons and rented a house for $12,000 a month, which they could easily pay. And then this eviction moratorium came along, they just stopped paying. Because
Yeah,
the geniuses that be didn't index it to a bill, even though it's insane to deny a property owner the right to earn a living off of their property, they didn't even bother to index it to income, right? So it was everything they touch, as I've said about the Biden administration, especially the Democrats in general. If they just took decisions at random, statistically 50% of what they did would be positive. It takes a certain genius to ensure that everything you do is negative, and they are phenomenal at it. Anyway, I interrupt. Sorry. Go
yeah,
on.
no, it made you stop, pause, and think they're doing this on purpose because
Oh
they
yeah.
are trying to destroy the middle class. The easiest thing they could have done, the smartest thing they could have done, which, a first grader could have figured this out at the time, was instead of giving all this money, with the CARES Act that Congress passed, instead of giving all this money to everybody, you give the money to the landlords for the tenants and you say, here's a rent voucher, right? Your tenant's not going to pay
Oh,
rent.
but then you're rewarding evil capitalists. You can't do that. Don't you hear that Democrats no longer believe in capitalism?
Yeah, it's really, It's a huge, huge issue, and it is still having effects today. Those lockdowns, especially here in New York, because they lasted so long,
Yes.
are still having repercussions today. And it wasn't just about the financial side of it,
No, they
also
just
about,
ruins children's lives. I mean, I had the most kind of heartbreaking conversation. I think a lot of New York parents, especially, because we left when de Blasio was elected to come to Florida. A lot of the folks I spoke to, I feel sad because they have somewhat like a Stockholm syndrome. They can't admit to themselves they let the government ruin their children's lives and did nothing about it. And a friend of mine who's my daughter and his daughter started kindergarten together in Battery Park City. Then we moved, came to Florida, and at the same time as she's finishing her last 2 years of high school and doing her first 2 years of college simultaneously, she's graduated, she's doing her third year of college. In that same time period, his daughter, who was kept home from school, had to repeat a grade and go to New Jersey. So they destroyed her life, which hopefully she will recover from. But that right there epitomized it. When I told him what my daughter was doing, the look on his face was one of the most painful conversations I've had with someone. They did this to you. They did it to you, and you did nothing to stop it. You let these idiots shut your daughter out of school.
yeah.
I don't think they can admit it to themselves that it wasn't justified. Because how do you admit to yourself you let the state do this to your kid and you just let them and you went
Yeah.
along with it? It's crazy.
It's a big problem, absolutely. And I speak about it still today, we're 4 years later, because people have to understand what was done to them was wrong.
Very
So
wrong.
when the government tries to do it again, the people will say, no, you can't do this. We fell for it last time because we didn't know what our rights were. But now we know what our rights were, and we're not going to do this again. But during that time period, it was the end of 2021, somebody came to me with this regulation that the New York State Health Department had issued, and it was called Isolation and Quarantine Procedures. And it basically gave the Department of Health the power to pick and choose which New Yorkers they could lock up or lock down, which means they could have locked you in your home and forced you to stay there, or they could have removed you from your home and put you into a detention center of their choosing. You had no say.
Nope, not at all.
And the regulation also said that they could use the force of police to enforce their orders, which means you could have gotten a knock on your door and it could have been the local sheriff or the police telling you, I'm sorry, you need to come with me. You're being
Sounds
sent to an
eerily
isolation
familiar.
camp. Right. And there was no restriction on age. So they could have done that to you, but they could have done it to your child,
Sure.
or your elderly
In the
parent.
legislation, were the police required to tell you this in German when they came to your door?
I mean, when I tell this story, that's what people think of immediately.
Crazy. Yeah, it's madness.
They think of Germany in the 1940s. That's
Right.
exactly, a lot of
Same
people
thing.
say that to me. And the other thing which is really scary is the regulation said they didn't have to prove you were sick.
Right.
They didn't have to prove you were exposed to a communicable disease. So they could just issue an isolation or a quarantine order and you would have no recourse. You weren't even entitled to an attorney until after you were locked up or locked down. It's like guilty until proven innocent. And someone
People
showed me,
wonder why leftists have two massive preoccupations all day long, everywhere they come, from Hitler to Biden to Hochul. They want to strip people of their Second Amendment rights because can't fight back, and the First Amendment rights. They hate both, and the two are intimately connected, and they are preoccupied with that day in, day out. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, it's very true. It is very true. And when people, I say, they're after the Second Amendment. We are a free country because of the Second Amendment. People say, oh, that's ridiculous. They're not doing any gun grabs. I'm saying it's not like they come knock on your door and say, give me your gun. That's not what they're doing because they're not that stupid. It's the legislation and the regulations that they impose
Yeah.
which slowly inches 1 inch, then 2 inches, then 3 inches, and infringes on your right to bear arms. A quick example here in New York, their gun law was struck down
By the
by
Supreme Court,
SCOTUS.
and they just ignored it. They charged
And
right ahead and changed it to
well, yeah, they issued a new law, which was also unconstitutional, but they started going after the ammunition. They started
right.
saying, well, we're going to regulate the sale of ammunition, which is an attack on your Second Amendment
Of course.
right, because if you don't have ammunition for your gun, then
Yeah.
what,
It's just that it's just an awkward club at that point.
yeah, yeah. So, people need to be aware and wake up and see through the smoke screen a little bit here. Our rights are our rights, and the government's not allowed to take our rights away.
And right
Um,
now they have stripped them away. I mean, it's insane. A friend in New York, upstanding citizen, taxpayer, property owner, 19-month process to get a permit to own the handgun. Never mind whether he can take it out of his house, because the way they've sectioned it up, you can't be within 200 feet of a school, you can't be at 1,000 feet of a park. Well, you try to walk through Manhattan without coming into one of those protected zones, and you are now a felon for carrying the firearm that you were constitutionally guaranteed to carry.
yeah,
Madness. And people are still putting up with it. It's madness.
yep.
And the criminals wander around armed to the hilt. They're not presenting their ID to buy bullets.
Of course, of course.
But I know your time is limited. I want to get to the suit you brought against Hochul and the government. How did that originate? What came out of it, and where is it now? I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
so it was based on this regulation, this isolation and quarantine regulation. And I read that regulation and immediately knew it was completely unconstitutional. So I did bring a lawsuit against Governor Hochul, and this was on behalf of a group of New York State legislators, Senator George Borrello, Assemblyman Chris Tague, Congressman Mike Lawler, and then a citizens group called Uniting New York State. And in essence, the argument was, this is the wrong branch of government. The executive branch, the governor, the Department of Health, they don't have the power to make this regulation in the first place. And second of all, the regulation itself is unconstitutional because it has no due process protections built into it, which is a requirement under our Constitution. So we battled it out in the trial court level. Ultimately, we won, and the trial court did strike down the regulation, said it was unconstitutional, banned them from either enforcing it or trying to reissue the regulation again.
right.
That was in 2022. And then we
A
had an
wonderful
election.
day in American history for those who don't know. Put that on your calendar somewhere.
Yeah, yep. They issued the decision just after the 4th of July. It was July 8th of 2022. And, we had an election in 2022. The governor was running for election. Our attorney general, Letitia James, was running for election. So they didn't actually appeal that decision until after the election, right? So I was trying to warn people they're going to appeal this case. They are going to try to get this power back. They already put me on notice that they're eventually going to file an appeal.
Right.
But people voted them in. So now they're still in power.
Madness.
And in 2023, sure enough, they filed an appeal. And we fought it out in the appellate division for all of 2023. And in November, the appellate division, which is a panel of 5 judges, ruled that my plaintiffs didn't have standing.
I love that. I love it. I'm a New York State resident who's concerned that my governor is a dictator, but I don't have standing somehow to not be very quick comment for my listeners. Like, you got to pay attention to this and realize by now, this is nothing about public health, right? Like, it's over. Even no matter how much they try to drum it up again, because God, they want another virus that they can yap about for the next election, so Biden can hide in his basement again, right? But at this point, it's over. Like, the panic's over. And so they're still taking the time. The government is using taxpayer money to take the time to appeal this ruling so they can definitely have the ability to put you in jail whenever they want without a new process. If that doesn't wake people up, I really don't know what will. I really don't.
I know. I know. I do a lot of public speaking. I have an event tonight where I'm doing a speech. I was at an event yesterday or the day before. I'm trying to educate people because the mainstream media will not report on this case.
No.
They will not tell you what is going on in Albany. They will not, it's very sad. Alternative media is great. I mean, a lot of alternative media has picked up this story, but that doesn't reach the masses. That doesn't reach those voters that we need to reach, because the way to change this, I can keep bringing lawsuits. To finish the story on the quarantine camp, I am appealing that decision now to the state's highest court, which is the Court of Appeals, which is 7-judge panel, which sits in Albany. So the case is still ongoing, but we cannot just keep bringing lawsuits.
No,
You,
people
you
have to
know,
pay attention.
we need people to pay attention, get involved. And if getting involved only means voting these people out of office, then that's
That's
fine.
enough.
But we don't have that right now. We don't have the masses waking up to what's going on. A lot of people, because mainstream media won't cover it, a lot of people don't know what's going on. And then some people might have an idea of what's going on, but they don't want to hear it because it's so corrupt.
And they
It's
also
just,
take advantage of the normal people's fundamental belief that people are honest and the government surely is acting in my interest. I mean, they prey
right.
on that. I've written about this in an enormous amount of a book coming out shortly, but Bill Ayers, who, Weather Underground, Students for Democratic Society, terrorist bomber, went to high school with a good friend of mine years ago in Winnetka, Illinois. And if Bill Ayers' daddy hadn't been a rich insurance executive in Chicago, Bill would have been one more idiot thrown in jail in the 60s. But Bill Ayers' daddy's rich, got him out. And I remember him saying this directly to my pal when all that was happening, college age, that he and his wife, Dorn, who later gave birth to Chesa Boudin, who became the San Francisco lunatic district attorney, they deliberately modeled the left's action plan on the Jesuits of the Catholic Church. If you want to change society, you get into education, you change the young's minds. They deliberately did this. And people are now seeing it with the Jew hatred and the Marxism marching on campuses. Like, they finally feel emboldened after 50 years of this indoctrination. As you said, they stopped teaching history. They stopped teaching the Constitution. They stopped teaching logical thought. And they did this deliberately. And right now, as of now, they've won. How Governor Newsom, after his totalitarian madness, like Cuomo and Hochul in New York, could have faced a recall election and they kept him in office. How Hochul could have been elected in 2020. Like, people are not paying attention, and they're going to wander sheepishly into the concentration camps, which are now in New York still legal as a result of this appeal. And I don't know what it takes to wake people up. I really don't.
Yeah, I think that this is a very important election year. Here in New York, we have every single New York State senator, every single New York State assembly member up for election in November. We have,
Change could come.
yeah, absolutely. We have obviously the president is up for election. We also have members of Congress that are up for election. One of our US senators here is, running for re-election. She needs to go. She's been in that position for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. Absolutely, we need term limits because particularly in Congress, Chuck Schumer has been in Congress representing New York State since 1984.
Madness.
You
And
know,
before that, he was in the assembly, and a old business partner of mine was a young lawyer working in the state assembly at the time. And back then, they called him a assemblyman soundbite. He would run over a crippled child to get to a camera on the other side of the room. He's never had a real job. I grew up listening to my mother call him Upchuck. Like, how he keeps getting elected. He's a nightmare that has done nothing but damage to the country and America. And the brain dead New Yorkers go, yo, must vote for him again. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, I left sadly, but like I've always said to all my New York leftist friends, just vote Republican once. Try it. See what happens. See what happens if you throw these losers out. You may hate it, and then you go back to another 50 years of Democrat rule. Give it a try. No, they don't. It's terrifying.
It's terrible. It's really important people wake up. I'm not really advocating for one party. I'm not even Republican, but I do advocate against what the Democrats are doing.
Yep.
This is a Democrat governor in New York State that's trying to get this regulation reinstated. We have a Democrat attorney general who's fighting me tooth and nail with your tax dollars. We have an entire supermajority of Democrats in both our state Senate and our state assembly, which means not one Republican vote is needed
Right.
to do anything in this
And
state.
one party rule is terrible. Again, it doesn't have to be Republican or Democrat. In the 80s, the Republicans controlled Nassau County. They drove it into bankruptcy, right? So it's not like they're a virtuous, perfect party either, but you don't want one party rule anywhere in the world. And that's what you've got.
Definitely. One party rule is
Awful.
toxic no matter which party it is.
Can I ask a question about, because I know you got to go, the given where we are, given that the Wuhan panic is past us, what is the reason that Letitia James and Kathy Hochul give for bothering to spend taxpayer money to reinstate this concentration camp rule? Like, why? At this point, what's their justification for why it's needed?
Yeah, well, in their papers, even at the trial court level 2 years ago, they made it clear that this is a tool that they need to have in their toolbox for the next time that there's an emergency. So people really do have to understand what's going on. This is a complete attack on your freedom, multiple levels, right? Your freedom of life. You have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, if the government can throw you into either a detention center or your home, lock you down in your home and say you can't leave.
Yeah. Oh, they loved it when those videos of the Chinese communists welding people into their homes to die. That made Democrats excited. They thought that was great. Wow, if we could do that, that'd be awesome.
It's
Trudeau in
unbelievable.
Canada said as much. At least the ones down here south of the border have been slightly more, quiet about that fantasy. But they love it. They love the idea of telling people what to do.
Yeah, it's in a lot. It comes in a lot of different shapes and forms. It's not just the quarantine regulation. I have another case going against the New York State legislature right now for another breach of the Constitution, where they're trying to amend our New York State Constitution. They're going to put it on the ballot in November. And they didn't even follow the proper procedures. We have process. You have to follow each step if you want to get something on the ballot for the voters to vote on to change our Constitution. And they didn't. They did whatever they wanted, and they still want to change the Constitution. So it's really a scary situation. We have a government. Again, it's happening in New York, but it's not just New York. It's also happening
It's
at the
everywhere.
federal level.
Yeah.
And it is
Everywhere.
happening in other states. But we have a government that's out of control because the people who are the ones who are supposed to be in control are not paying attention. And that's why I'm here to try and help people understand and wake up.
Well, God bless. I mean, I love what you're doing, and appreciate everyone who's standing up. We've been yelling and writing about it, talking to the government about it. But I love the fact you took the fight to them and won, and they're coming back. You're taking the fight right back to them. It is. I don't know what it takes. I honestly do not know what it takes to wake people up, but I hope they do.
Yeah, I hope they do too.
You really do. The Caesars had it right. Bread and circuses. You keep, the Super Bowl on TV every year, and if they were smart, they wouldn't want inflation, which making everyone beer and hot dogs cost more. But I love what you're doing. I appreciate you taking the time. Any help I can offer, I'd love to. But at the very least, I can amplify the message. I mean, people need to wake up, because when you're busy just living your life, raising your kids, there's a group of people in the political class who are doing everything they can all day long to control your life.
Yeah. It's very true. And you know, what I do all day long is push back against those people. And you know, if people want to get more information about the work I'm doing, or if they want to follow along and see how it's coming along with the quarantine lawsuit, they can follow me. I have a Substack that I write once a week. I write an article. So if people want to go
Yep,
on my
we'll put all those
Substack,
links below. I encourage them to read it. It's absolutely brilliant.
great,
And
great.
go
Yeah.
on your
So
mailing list, all that, you bet.
that's really important to stay informed. I also am on Twitter, attorney_Cox. So you can follow me on Twitter, you know, repost whatever I'm posting. It's always informational. And I also have my website, which is coxlawyers.com. If people want to go on there, you can, I have a media tab and people can watch for further interviews or articles I've written about the lawsuit.
Perfect.
There's a whole host of information, and it's not just about the quarantine lawsuit, it's about other legal issues and attacks on our freedom. So I hope people will take the time. It's really important to get involved, and first thing you need to do is understand the issues before you can actually start getting involved. So
Perfectly said. Every journey starts with a single step, and comprehension and acceptance of reality is a good one. So again, thank you so much for taking the time and for the work you're doing. For my regular listeners, today should be a stunning reminder that my normal close, which is turn off the mainstream media who are lying to you and tune into Messy Times, is extremely apropos. Till next time, thank you so much.
thank you for having me.
You bet.